Hello and welcome to Ask GC Anything. You get to ask us anything and we will do our best to answer it. And some of you really do ask us anything, like this person, Eskimo Quinn, who sent this in via Twitter. And they have said, is it just me, or does it look like this person is holding another tiny person in their hand? This was at 9:15 on the GCN show, episode 217. And no, it's not just you, that is definitely a person holding a tiny human being. That is a brilliant spot, I can't believe that. Anyway, moving swiftly on, we have had plenty of cycling themed questions as well this week, like these two first up regarding carbon frames. I'll start with this one from Mathieu Lizotte, who has asked, how can I know when the lifetime of my carbon frame is over? And what is the consequence of riding with an older carbon frame if there are no visual flaws? Well, that's quite a tricky question to answer actually. On paper, carbon doesn't degrade, so your carbon frame could, in theory, last for a lifetime. However, we do know that sometimes a carbon frame could be damaged and yet not really show it on the surface. But I think the fair assessment is, if you haven't had any crashes or any big knocks, your carbon frame is probably going to be absolutely fine. The reason people seem to be quite suspicious of carbon is that it's had a bit of a bad press, and unfairly so as well, so you probably should be able to take confidence in your carbon frame, just as much as you would in any other frame material, to be fair. Right, and then the next carbon question is this one from Michael McDowell, who sent it in on Twitter as well. Is water trapped inside a high-end carbon road frame a major problem? There are no drain holes, will corrosion occur? Well, the good news is no corrosion will occur on your carbon frame, because carbon obviously doesn't corrode. So in that respect, it's absolutely fine. Unfortunately, the lowest point on a frame is your bottom bracket. So you may well find that the bottom bracket itself could corrode if you get loads of water in there. So the simple answer and solution to your problem is to periodically take your seat post out, tip your frame upside down and let any water drain out. Because if you've got a high-end carbon frame, you don't want to be adding any grams of water to it. Next up, we've got this question from Chris Harris, who said that he saw someone on Strava doing fasted training. What is it? Have you used it before? Well, fasted training is effectively going for a bike ride without having had any breakfast before. So you are effectively training in a fasted state. And yes, I have used it a reasonable amount actually when I was full-time, but I don't do it anymore because it's not perhaps the most fun way of going for a bike ride. You need to keep your intensity levels quite low, but it can be really, really effective. But if you want to know more on this subject, then the video that's currently playing behind me is called High Carb versus Low Carb, What is the most effective way to train? And actually, it's one of the most controversial GCN videos of all time. Enjoy, and then spend a bit of time reading through the 1,200 comments below it.
Now, when you're exercising on a low carb diet, your body doesn't just burn the carbs, actually can burn protein as well as fat.
Right, now the dust has settled following the controversial nutrition video, we're going to move on to another very serious question actually, sent in by CrustinHome99, who says that when he goes riding, his penis goes numb. He said he's changed his saddle twice already, but what could the problem be? Is it positioning? Is it the wrong bib shorts? Well, I think you can leave aside bib shorts, that's not going to affect it. I think you're absolutely bob on when you talk about your positioning, because having the wrong saddle height could put a bit too much pressure on the wrong places, so to speak. So if your saddle is too high particularly, but actually probably of much more importance is the reach to your handlebars, because that governs how far forward you lean. And so if you've got to lean too far forward, then your hips will rotate, and that will obviously really load up the pressure on your perineum, which is probably the place that's suffering. And so the question that you want to ask yourself is, are you reaching too far? And so this video just playing in the background could well help you with that decision. So I'll leave you to watch that video and then click through to it.
If you get that reach wrong over that amount of time, it can add up to discomfort and at worst pain and injuries.
Okay, next question comes from Robert Lindley, who says he's a 73-year-old cyclist living in the pretty hilly and pretty windy South Pennines of Yorkshire. No arguments there, definitely hilly and definitely quite windy. He says he gets out about 3 times a week, doing approximately 140 kilometres in total, but he seems to have issues holding on to muscle mass and therefore fitness. Any advice? Well, I'm certainly not a qualified coach in this matter, but And there is one thing that I suggest that you could try, having read about it in a few different places, and that is actually doing resistance training. So literally going to the gym and lifting weights. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go there and just start picking up dumbbells and stuff. It needs to be done in a really safe and correct way. But by all accounts, actually everyone struggles to hold on to muscle mass when they get beyond a certain age. And so going to the gym actually really helps your body hold on to that, and therefore it can improve your quality of life in other areas, such as riding your bike. So give that a go, but like I say, make sure you do it in a really safe, controlled way, and consult an expert on it. Okay, next question. We've got this one from Ramesses Moya, who has said that often they ride on their own and love to stop for a coffee along the ride. But while you're on your own, do you lock your bike? Do you carry a lock when you're riding? Now, that's a tricky question. A bit depends on where you ride, the cafe that you stop at, and how long you're going to have to leave your bike for. No, I personally don't stop. I don't carry a lock, rather, but then I don't stop all that often when I'm on my own. But there is a little technique that you can use when you're desperate to stop for a coffee. It's in this video right now, so I suggest you take a look at it and then have a go, but always you've got to keep your fingers crossed because it's not fail-safe.
Now, for most thieves, they're not going to be noticing if they're undone, and it's going to make it pretty hard for them to ride off on your bike when they come along to try and nick it.
Okay, quick fire questions now. The point in this video where we answer questions at exactly the same speed, but pretend we're going faster. First of all, we got this from Adam Golfazzo, sent in on Twitter. He is gonna try everesting summer. Have we got any tips on pacing for 100 reps of a climb if he doesn't have a power meter? Well, the first tip I think actually would be to try and get yourself a heart rate monitor. In terms of cost, it's just a fraction of the price of a power meter, but it can do a very similar job, and that is that it stops you from trying too hard. Because if you have a look at your heart rate on your handlebars, on your head unit or whatever, then it will effectively mean that you have like a rev limiter, so you simply stop yourself from trying too hard. But if you don't have a heart rate monitor, the thing to do is just to make sure in the back of your mind you're always thinking about going as slowly as possible, because you can always get faster as the day goes on, but you don't want to do it the other way around. Okay, next up, we got this from Niall Horner. How do I stop bouncing on the rollers when I'm going flat out? And that is really tricky, and it's part of the reason why rollers are so good for one thing in particular, and that is teaching you to pedal really smoothly. So I'd suggest, if you want to stop bouncing, is to actually work up to it quite slowly and just concentrate on pedaling really smoothly. So pulling up on the pedal stroke and scraping through at the bottom. Now, it won't necessarily make you faster out on the open road, because the jury is very much still out on whether or not pulling up as well as pushing down on the pedals helps, but it will certainly help stop you bouncing on the rollers. So why don't you give that a try? Okay, Eat, Ride, Grow has asked, what are the benefits of motor pacing? So motor pacing is effectively where you train while sitting in the slipstream of a motorbike or a car. And so what it means is that instead of training at 32 kilometers per hour, you can train at 50 kilometers per hour. And therein lies its secret, because actually it's used by a lot of pros who perhaps might not have any races coming up, but they still need to train to be race ready. And so it effectively simulates being in a race by riding around at 50 kilometers an hour. And the reason that's important is because actually pedaling on faster speeds, or at faster speeds, feels very different, and actually has a different training effect to pedaling at slower speeds, even if the power output is the same. So that is why they do it. It won't necessarily make you a fitter cyclist, it just conditions you for riding at faster speeds. But you also got to be really careful, because motor pacing is illegal in most places, I suspect. So if you are going to do it, make sure you do it on a closed circuit. We certainly couldn't advocate doing it out on the open roads. Next, we got a question from Leon Sangaku, who's asked if we can make a video explaining the different types of body composition that make the best cyclists. It's a really great idea, actually, and we will get onto that. But the short answer is, the great thing about cycling is there are loads of different types of bodies that make great cyclists. You just have to look at the men's pro peloton, for example. You see a rider like Tom Boonen, who is really tall, versus a rider like Caleb Ewan, who is quite short. And then on the GC side, you've got Chris Froome, who is tall and incredibly skinny, and his chief arch nemesis, who is Nairo Quintana, who is much shorter and yet looks a little bit more muscled. And all of those riders are fantastic and at the absolute top of their game. So, like I said, the great thing about cycling is that everyone has a good chance of doing it. The only thing they have in common is that they're all pretty lean. Okay, next up, Ewan Chadwell has asked effectively enough questions to do an entire Ask GC Anything on there. Do teams carry around race leaders' jersey with them? No, they don't actually. The races themselves provide the jerseys. What the teams have is like a transfer that the race organisers can then iron on to the jerseys, which makes it look like they've got their sponsors on there already. That's kind of a cool tip. Do track sprinters change bikes between rounds so they can change tactics? Nope, I don't think they do, because at the end of the day, it's all about top speed really for those guys, so they probably use the same gearing most of the time. Is it better for my bike to leave it in a certain gear when I'm not riding it? Nope, doesn't matter, which is good news. Do some riders race with their phones for apps like Strava? No, no one will race with a phone in their pocket, I don't think. Should sprint stage be shorter to give breakaway a better chance of staying away for longer, making it more exciting? No, the funny thing about pro racing is that pretty much no matter how short or long the stage, the pro peloton will always be able to gauge the catch. Well, at least they will. Probably 49 times out of 50 maybe. Okay, Ewan, I'm going to leave the rest of your questions because, like I say, that's a whole episode in itself. And then move on to this last one from Nikola Martic, who said, what to eat during long rides if I'm avoiding refined sugar? Well, your suggestion here of bananas, that's a great shout. Dried fruit, but also look at savoury stuff as well, like sandwiches with ham and cheese in. That's still a staple in the pro peloton. And actually, eating just fruit is probably not the best thing to do, because I think the jury has definitely decided that fructose is probably not the best way to fuel for your rides. Right, we're on to our last few questions now, I'm afraid. This one from @Woby1 on Twitter. They've asked, what's the best way of preventing punctures when out riding mixed trails on a cyclocross bike? Hashtag pump fail and hashtag CO2 fail. That's bad luck, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to throw to a video now that we made quite a long time ago, but it's still relevant, okay, because I always use tubeless tyres when I'm on my cyclocross bike, and therefore tubeless wheels as well. But back in the day, I actually made non-tubeless tyres work with non-tubeless wheels, and we made a video about it. And you may find that you struggle to do it, but in terms of puncture resistance, I can't recommend it enough. Tubeless for cyclocross makes total sense. You effectively remove the inner tube so you've got no chance of pinch puncturing, and then you fill your tyre with a bit of sealant so that if you get a little thorn puncture or something like that, then the sealant will fill that hole whilst you're riding. It's not 100% fail-safe, but it certainly cuts down the amount of punctures that I get. So have a look. Right, tighten the valve down firmly. Give the wheel a good spin to make sure the sealant is spread evenly. And then it's just a case of trying to pump it up. Right, I'm going to leave Ask GC Anything with a question actually for you all to help answer, because Zach Sigouin has sent in this and we couldn't exactly work out what to say. He has said, if you have two bikes of equal value that you love equally and they have very similar components and fit, how do you decide which one to sell if you have to get rid of one? That's just brutal. That is a horrible situation to find yourself in. I do sympathise with you a great deal, Zach. And actually, like I said, I don't know which one you should sell. Perhaps the one that's got the most life left in it, the one that has the chain in the best condition and the gears and the brake cables. I don't know. Which is why I want you lot to try and help. Can you help Zach decide which bike to sell? Like I say, I really feel sorry for you, Zach. Right, now I am going to leave Ask GC Anything there. If you have anything that you want to know about cycling, or in fact anything at all that we may be able to help you with, then do get involved in the comments section down below. The next thing to say is to make sure that you subscribe to GCN. If you haven't done it already, it's very simple and it is completely free. Just click on the globe. And then if you are after more up-to-date GCN content, then we've got two very good videos that came out just this week. Firstly, how to train for short Gran Fondos and Sportifs. That video is just up there. Or another philosophical question actually, perhaps not quite as severe as Zach's, but saddlebag versus jersey pocket. Which is the best way to carry your riding essentials? That one is just down there.